This is Common Sense with Hadil. Follow Bright, watch us on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. According to the World Bank data, in 2011 and before the war in Yemen, more than 10 million of the Yemenis were under the poverty line. Since the 90s, thousands of the Mujahideen of Afghanistan has resided in Yemen, where they built the most powerful branch for Al-Qaeda. Yemen is the only country with a situation like this in the wealthy Arab Peninsula. In the aftermath of the Arab Spring, Iran has exploited all the weak elements of Yemen to take it as a station that can throw instability and chaos in the Arab Peninsula. Since the first day of the war, Saudi Arabia has been ready for any peace deal for Yemen according to the Security Council resolutions. The Houthis has violated every chance for peace in the country. For Saudi Arabia, the target has never been to eradicate the Houthis. The Arab coalition wanted to see the Houthi engaged in the political process in Yemen, but as a political and local group, the Houthi continue to fight as a proxy for Iran. For Saudi Arabia, a stable country with a vision for development, a home for big communities of international workers, peace in Yemen is the only goal. The Arab coalition wants to stop Yemen from being a threat to the region. For Iran, that's facing the strongest sanctions in its history, war and blood in Yemen is the target itself. This is Iran's last chance to have a foot in the Arab Peninsula. David Roboy of the Security Studies Group will tell us more about this.
A few years ago, Saudi Arabia was faced with the prospect of another Hezbollah built on its southern border. The Iranians were funding and promoting and arming the Houthi rebels that were promising to take over the country from the legitimate government in Yemen. And there's really no country that would stand for having another one of these mini Hezbollahs put on its doorstep. Now, I say mini Hezbollah because just like Hezbollah, the Houthis are Iranian funded, they're Iranian directed, they are a state within a state. And the prospect of having this on your southern border, where you are subject to ballistic missile attacks, where you're subject to other kinds of terrorism, cross-border attacks of all kinds, not to mention the terrible humanitarian disaster that the Houthis are promoting in Yemen. So it's entirely reasonable that Saudi Arabia would wage this war and would feel that they need to wage it because they do. The United States also has an interest in Saudi Arabia prevailing here over Iranian-backed Houthi forces, which is we benefit from the free and open use of the sea lanes. Yemen is in a very strategic geographic location, and we can't afford to have Iran or Iran-backed an Iran-backed state within a state militia like the Houthis in control of that real estate. You know, not for our economy and not for our national security. Yemen is in a key strategic location, and we know that Iran has Iran has said that they have the desire to, and they have the means to shut down the flow of oil in the Arabian Gulf and also around the Red Sea, transiting into Europe. And of course, this would do terrible damage to the world economy because of the oil prices. If you can't ship oil, if you can't sell oil, what are you going to do with it? It's going to stay there. To be at the mercy of the Iranian regime and what they may or may not do as far as economic warfare against us is not a good prospect. I think the Trump administration is very committed to seeing Yemen free of Iranian influence, and that means, frankly, supporting Saudi Arabia in its efforts there. I really believe that President Trump will veto any congressional resolution that tries to kind of unreasonably tie his hands when it comes to this region. You can't have senators and members of Congress running around saying that they oppose Iran on one hand, and then on the other hand saying that we need to give a free hand to the Iranians in Yemen. It just doesn't make any sense. And yet, because the media hasn't called them to account, a lot of these people are continue to be able to do so. So I really think that a Trump veto right now would possibly bring these things into sharper relief. I think from the perspective of the Trump administration and specifically John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, they're very strong on this. I think it looks like the president will veto any congressional resolution to this effect that will, in effect, give Yemen to Iran by hampering U.S. and Saudi efforts over there. So I don't think that's really something to fear. I mean, thank goodness that the Trump administration is in control in this respect. So I don't think they would let that happen. The plan that they had devised and they're working through is to sort of non-militarily but economically and politically isolate Iran and force it back sort of within its borders. So force it out of Syria, force it out of, Iraq is going to be a harder thing, but force it out of Yemen, force it to scale back. I think that, frankly, that Lebanon should be on the menu as well. But only then will you get to a real good balance of power where the United States' interests and the interests of our allies are really taken into account.
Thank you and see you next week.